This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Love and War, Part 3. When we left off, Fred Acevedo, the supervising agent at the Federal Bureau of Investigations, was wrapping up the debrief of Melissa's abduction for Q and his family. The family had asked a number of questions, and Fred had provided them with the answers. It appeared that at least 3 of the people in the room had information about how Melissa responded to the intruders: the Queen Mother, Big Wood, and Donovan. And it still wasn't clear who was behind the abduction, while the feds were moving with the assumption that Melissa's abduction was the result of the work that Q was doing for the agency on a huge international trafficking case. Fred had intimated that it could very well be associated with one of the family's enemies. Supervisor Acevedo was the same agent who was responsible for oversight of the operation in Miami when Tracy Newport and her son Trey had been abducted by the Newports. He'd asked Q to join the FBI, and when Q turned him down, he told Q that they'd see one another again. So when New York Detective Erickson, was sniffing around Texas, working the Christian Daniels missing persons case, and he had Donovan and Anya on his radar, Supervisor Acevedo made Q an offer that was very difficult to turn down. If you watch Queenpin 2.0, then you already know that Big Wood lost a Sig Sauer during an operation in Colombia where True was being held hostage, and Santiago Morena, the head of the Colombian crime family, was in possession of that pistol and was threatening to send it to the feds. After multiple discussions with his wife and consultation with Pastor Corey, who'd retired from the feds, Q decided to save Donovan and Big Wood, while also watching the back of 3 of his other family members: his mother, his sister-in-law, Stephanie, and his first cousin, Selima, all 3 of whom were gearing up to be Queenpins. So Q sat down with Supervisor Acevedo and said, "You already know me and the family that I come from. I'm sure you know more about all of us than I even realize. So I won't BS you or play any games, and I expect the same of you. I cannot work for you if it means putting my family in danger. And while I'm not in the life that they're in, and I don't condone everything that they do, what I do can't put a spotlight on them and what they do. You may think that you're making me an offer that I can't refuse, but real talk, you'll get a whole hell of a lot more out of me coming to work for you than I'll ever get out of the deal. My back is not up against the wall. I can absolutely walk out of these doors right now, go back to work at the company I own in Tico, go home and make love to my wife, go to bed and sleep well, because my loyalty is to my family. And if I take this job, that's where my loyalty will remain. So I'm going to need some assurances, and a whole lot more than having the heat off of my baby brother. I know what I bring to the table. Do you?" Then Q asked for everything he could possibly want and got it. And when he found out that he would be using his undercover and his technical skills to find missing children, he was ecstatic. And the fact that the PI firm that he co-owned with LJ was going to be making money hand over fist by working the investigations was icing on the cake. So when Fred finished his debrief, he released the family into the capable hands of Q and his partner, Agent Nisha Rushing. Nisha Rushing had been with the agency for over a decade. She'd been on Supervisor Acevedo's team for 6 or 7 of those years, and when he'd been promoted to supervisor 3 years before, she'd also been promoted to team lead. When Q finished his initial training at Quantico and returned to the Dallas branch for his hands-on training, Nisha was transferred to the Dallas branch as well. She'd been primarily responsible for leading trafficking cases, and together she and Q were working the missing or abducted child cases. They made a great team because they brought their individual expertise to the table, and they were able to play on one another's experience. While this situation was personal for Q, he and his partner had the same thing in mind. They'd go into these interviews playing good cop, bad cop. He'd ask the questions, and she'd do the listening and observations. And as difficult as the prospect was, Q decided that he would start with his own wife. Q said to the family, "You all are going to have to make this worth my while. Please do not make me or my supervisor regret this. He's only allowing me to do this because he knows that our family has some business ventures that aren't necessarily above board. The expectation is that you're going to have to reveal some things that aren't necessarily legal in order to provide me with all of the information that we need to find Melissa. I need you all to be more focused on finding her than you are on protecting yourselves. Don't get caught up and worried about my feelings or how what you share with me might impact your relationship with me. Then he looked right at Donovan and said, if you told Melissa something, showed her something, taught her something, or gave her something that you haven't thus far shared with me, then he looked at the Queen Mother and said, and you're concerned at all about how I might feel or how I might respond, set all of that aside and focus on ensuring that you share everything you can possibly think of that will help me find my daughter. Do not hold anything back and take matters into your own hands. Then he looked at both Stephanie and Selena and said, this is not a competition, nor is this an opportunity to secure or solidify an impending role or position change. If Melissa's abduction is in any way connected with my work for the FBI, the last thing that I need is for all of the gangsters in the world to start participating in their own version of the amazing race. I don't care how good you are at doing what it is that you do. I do not need any of you running parallel investigations. Then he looked at Donovan while saying, running off on wild goose chases and trying to be one-man shows. Then he looked at the Queen Mother and said, or making people disappear and creating international incidents. Make yourselves comfortable. We'll be here for a while. And no one leaves until we're done. Then Q took Angela into the study, sat her down and said, love, I know this is a lot and I know it's hard, but I'm going to need. Angela cut him off and said, baby, I've had all the consoling that I can stand. Let's find our daughter. Q said, my girl. Then Angela said, now, I know that you trust her, but I don't. And I don't care how y'all usually handle investigations. You know that I've never been comfortable with her. And I'm not any more comfortable with her now. For all I know, she might have something to do with our daughter's abduction. Q said, love, that's ridiculous. Nisha would. Angela said, you need a second. You need somebody to do the observations, to hear what you don't and ask the important questions, right? Then get LJ in here. But we don't know where our daughter is or who has her. We don't know who's behind this. Nisha said, Angela, it would be ridiculous to believe. Angela cut her off and said, my name is Mrs. St. James. Agent Rushing, we are not friends. Then Angela looked at Q and said, this would not be the first time that someone's orchestrated a kidnapping so that they could orchestrate a rescue. Now, you can dismiss her or I will. Q looked at Nisha and said, so there's an office I'm going to set you up in so that you can run down leads, and I'm going to get my brother in here instead. Nisha said, but, and Q said, you're not tall enough to box with God or Big Ange. Nisha said, Fred's going to hear about this. Q said, do what you got to do, while walking her out of the room. There was clearly no love lost between Angela and Agent Nisha Rushing. Call it possessiveness, territorialness, whatever you want to call it, but Angela was calling it women's intuition. Nisha may have been a trained professional, but she was also young, beautiful, and a native of Miami, and she had the body to prove it. She was also single and way too friendly. In addition, she tried way too hard to be friends with Angela and the family. And on several occasions, she and Q had to go undercover as a married couple, looking to procure the services of a trafficker, which meant that they had to cozy up to one another and make it look good. A year and a half in, and Q was spending almost as much time with his partner as he was with his wife. And that was a problem. When Q and LJ returned, Angela told them all about her dream and about her last few conversations with Melissa, and that Melissa had told her about the new gardener. On her second day back at the boarding school, Melissa called Angela when she was ready for bed, and during that conversation, Melissa said, today when I took Karma out for exercise, the strangest thing happened. She took an attack position and started growling and barking at the new gardener. I don't know if it's because he's new and he looks funny or if it was something else, but it kind of weirded me out. Angela said, oh, really? What do you mean he looks funny? Melissa said, the side of his face looks like it's melting. And I'm sure that's probably not nice and the right thing to say, but that's the only way I can think of to describe it, Mommy. Angela chuckled and said, it's okay, baby. You use your words however you need to. It's just you and I talking, but please don't ever tell him that it looks like the side of his face is melting. Now, other than the way that he looks, what has he said or done that's made you uncomfortable, or is it just Karma's reaction? Melissa said, oh, his face doesn't bother me at all. I've seen weird people lots of times. It was mostly Karma's reaction and what he did later on. Angela asked, what did he do? Melissa said, well, when I took Karma out for her last walk, he was still here. In the old garden, usually would be gone at least 2 hours and 17 minutes earlier than that. One of Melissa's fixations, being on the spectrum, was time. So she could always be counted on to know what time it was, what time that things happened, what time things were supposed to happen. And if something happened out of a sequence or at a time that was out of the ordinary. She said, when I saw him, he was sitting in the grass eating his lunch, and he was right in the path where I usually walk Karma. Karma was off leash, and he whistled, and she went over to him. I was calling her back, but he was holding a piece of roast beef or something. Everybody else here knows not to feed Karma, but I guess they didn't tell him. And before I could get over there to stop him, he'd given her a piece. So I told him, don't feed my dog. Angela said, baby, I hope you didn't say it like that. You need to remain respectful. Melissa said, I'm sorry, Mommy, but I was a little mad. Then he asked me why not. And I told him that Karma was a personal protection dog. And then he started asking me a bunch of questions, like how'd I pick the name Karma, and how long I'd had her, and where she was trained. Angela asked, and what did you do? Melissa said, I told him that it was none of his business, and then I grabbed Karma by the collar and pulled her away. Angela said, oh, Lord, did you actually say none of your business? Melissa said, yes, ma'am. In the study, Angela said, I should have known then that something was up with that gardener asking my baby all those questions. I was too busy focused on whether she was being mannerable and polite and respectful. I should have called up to that school and questioned them about that man. This is all my fault. You said, love. Angela said, no, don't try to make me feel better. It was all my idea for her to go to this school in the first place. You tried to tell me that she wasn't ready. You said, love, this could have happened anywhere. Angela said, anywhere but at home.
And LJ said, so y'all was going to keep her home for the rest of her life?
Angela said, don't try to make me feel better. Hugh said, you've taught her to be respectful and mannerable and polite. But I've taught her to be herself and make people respect it. Melissa does not make friends, and she does not mind. She did everything right, everything that she was supposed to do. And you already know that when bad people have bad intentions, they do bad things. And we do not have the power to stop them all the time. Angela said, I know, and you're right. And you don't have time to be making me feel better. Who do you want to come in here next, babe? She said, I'm not in a hurry. I need to know that you're okay. It'll be several hours before I see you again. And when I'm done here, I'm heading to North Carolina. Angela said, and I'm going with you. Q said, we have 4 other children who are going to need you here. I understand why you want to go, but I need you to stay home, love. Angela said, fine.
But if I'm not going, neither is Agent Rushing. You take LJ or Big Wood. Q said, that's fine, love. Then Angela said,
who do you want me to send in next? Q said, the Queen Mother. And as Angela left the room, Q's phone rang. When he answered it, it was Wise. Wise said, hey, yo, boss, the old lady's on the move. What you want me to do? Q said, give her a wide berth. And if anything promising shakes, you stay on that and put somebody else on her. Wise wasn't at the estate because he'd already been flown to North Carolina. And while the feds were shaking every tree and checking every pocket, Wise was leading a team of PIs who were assigned to everybody connected to the old gardener and the new one. Angela's first cousin Lorenzo, the son of Emmanuel Lopez, was one of the most proficient hackers in the world. He was better than even the employees at the FBI. And he had remotely hacked into the wife of the old gardener's cell phone. And Wise was using it to keep track of her. Her cell phone use had been rather interesting since they'd cracked it, and using a high-powered pair of binoculars, Wise had observed her running around the inside of her house, grabbing things and throwing them into a suitcase. Her husband was nowhere to be found, and she appeared to be distraught. Both the feds and Lorenzo had already discovered that her husband had had his passport scanned early that morning in Mexico, but he had not taken his wife with him. The elderly couple had one college-age daughter. She was a change-of-life baby, and she was also missing. She'd gone out the night before and never returned to her dorm room. Her roommate had reported her missing, and Q, his supervisor, and the PI team were all on the same page. They all believed that this was all connected. Whoever had Melissa was covering their tracks. The gardener had resigned on their say-so, and to get him out of the way and keep his mouth shut, they'd snatched his daughter and made arrangements for him to disappear. It was not uncommon for criminals to snatch family members, then dangle their safety like a carrot to get the cooperation of their ultimate targets. So they all suspected that one of two things was happening. Either the wife was heading to the city where her daughter attended school, or she'd received instructions from the people who were pulling the strings. And Wise asked, and if I come up on somebody who looks like they could be a person of interest, Q said, do whatever you feel like you need to do. Just don't kill them. But you can torture them if you want to. I don't give a damn.